Right, welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today it's November 20th. On the docket, post-mortem, I think that's what we call it at Google, of KubeCon. Doug, thanks for covering that one. Give us some updates on what was happening there. And then I have a topic on feedback from John Balamic. I had a chance to get in touch with him on our kind of approach of the DRA plus the pod network CRD. So, and then give me great takeaways on how to kind of deal with that and give me some insight on the resourcing. So I basically know now everything on how this should be probably. Take it away, Doug.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll give the postmortem. In my ops days, we would use that if we had like a severe outage, we'd call it a postmortem.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we use it for here as well. Yeah, that's true.
But you know it works because so I guess I would say at a high level, for me, very, very busy KubeCon. There were a lot of really good discussions. I don't want anyone to feel like they missed out because it's all good. We'll continue to work together. But yeah, really good discussions. Yeah, still on the high level, people didn't stop talking about DRA. So for sure, DRA continues to be a thing. I think that there was a lot of interest and questions surrounding DRA for networking as a topic. So I feel like we're in a very relevant place and what we've been discussing. And I certainly had people say, hey, you know, what's going on with multi-network in terms of DRA? Where is multi-network right now? And I'm like, hey, well, you should check our notes because for the last month or better, we've been every session going through and kind of playing out what that would wind up looking like. And I'm like, and I did explain to people, you know, it's kind of taking us back and questioning our like first principles here. There was also a lot of people who hadn't caught up on where we're currently at. You know, people asking like, "Hey, why is the KEP closed?" And it's
Mm.
like, well, if you missed the memo, we decided quite a while ago that we're going to go a CRD route, but we're also, you know, questioning that principle as we work through the DRA. Um, Additionally, lots of discussion and hype around DRA CNI driver that Lionel proposed and certainly you know, enabled in part by the resource claim status kept for DRA. Those were some of the discussions and questions and thoughts people had. Lionel and I did present at the contributors summit to kind of explain where we're at. I'll dig up that deck to share with people. I don't necessarily think that there'll be anything in there that's earth-shattering to folks in this call. Although Kapil, it actually could be really valuable for you to see. So in a few minutes here, when I'm done talking, I'll get the link to that deck because I think it'll provide some good background context. And um, and yes, so uh yeah, I guess also kind of community wise, something that we've been talking about in a number of venues, but certainly was brought up at KubeCon is trying to get the CNI maintainers and the network plumbing working group folks sort of banded together to work together as part of SIG Network. And maybe we can adopt some of those projects under Kubernetes officially. In my dream world, I'd love to see those groups and us also kind of join forces together. When this effort started for this multi-networking working group, I was really hoping that more folks from the network plumbing working group would want to participate. And I'd love to see more of that happen and more experimentation, because at least from my viewpoint, the way networking works in Kubernetes is going to evolve from where we are today. And at least from my standpoint, Network Plumbing Working Group has lots of tools that are relevant in this area. And I'd love to see those tools evolve towards kind of new paradigms for how this all works. So yeah, those are kind of some of my updates. Mike and Lionel gave a CNI maintainers update, which also included DRA CNI driver, which at least for me is relevant in our context, insofar as I personally think that that's where we're going to see a lot of kind of gap analysis from where we are today to what things look like under DRA. I know what we've proposed is, of course, implementation agnostic, including CNI. However, lots of people are going to live with CNI legacy for quite some time. Yeah, Mike, do you have any other things that I missed? I probably missed the like dozen things because there was a lot, but.
No, you covered everything that I pretty much remember as well. I don't think I have anything to add.
Any takeaways from the meeting that you had, Doug, about multi-networking? Any questions, any discussions around from that, or?
You know, nothing concrete, at least. I think that for the most part with folks in the room, they were getting caught up with what's going on. The one thing that I didn't get to, so one thing that's nice is, so Kevin Clues joined that session, which I was happy about because of course he's very involved in the structured parameters for DRA. And the one thing I didn't get to talk to people about as much as I wanted to, which is kind of one of my KubeCon regrets, is what folks from DRA land think about the allocation of kind of virtualized resources, right? So if you're attaching networks and they're not necessarily like directly resource bound, then it seems like a lot of overhead in a way to be like allocating these resources that are kind of infinite, right? Like say for example, like back VLAN, right? There's no inherent like limitation. I guess you could exhaust all the MAC addresses, but that would take quite a while.
No, it's you will always be bound by either your subnet or number of MAC spots per node.
Yeah, there is always going to be some limitations. And it's funny, I actually brought this up with Tomo and kind of giving Tomo a news flash. And I always appreciate the way he thinks of stuff. He's like, but resource bound constraints and networking have been a thing for many, many years. What about RSVP? Which is for like communicating resource constraints with the networking protocol. So he was challenging me to think of it that way. I also had not directly related to this discussion, but I had a few discussions with folks that are contributors to Whereabouts IPAM CNI, of which I'm a maintainer, and some of those folks were very interested in like what does the future look like with DRA in the picture, and I heard some interesting ideas there. Like certainly as you scale Whereabouts, there are a number of challenges, and they started to think of, oh, could we have some kind of a DRA driver that helps us like meet those kind of constraints, and I'm trying to think what examples they gave, but I thought it was a creative thinking about it. And also something that we talked about in that context as well is like, okay, so let's say you're using DRA and you're not using CNI, but you may already be using something like Whereabouts, and it uses CNI as its API, right? So one of the questions that's been brought up actually from a guy on my team, and then additionally, I talked about it with some of these contributors as well, was the idea of, hey, maybe we should expose some general purpose API from Whereabouts, like say a REST API or gRPC that you could just use kind of ad hoc, and have a CNI shim if you want to use it. But if you're if you're performing networking from another context, say it's a DRA driver and you don't care about CNI, maybe it would give you an opportunity to call that or integrate it. And I'm personally very curious about how some of these things from, say, Network Plumbing Working Group might work in the future too, like SROV network operator, right? It uses device plugin. It kind of is like a number of components together, right? It's SROV CNI, it's a webhook to inject resources, and it's an operator. Like, how do those things fit together? They're useful tools. You shouldn't necessarily say, hey, everybody, you have to reinvent the wheel because there's a new way to do this. But yeah, some of my thoughts there.
All right, that's awesome. Any other questions? All right. Any other topics, by the way? I think I didn't ask about that. We're gonna go to the DRA discussion. I think that's gonna take the rest of the meeting. Any other shorter topics to bring up? Anyone? All right. So I got together with John, and he gave me some rundown on. I gave him a rundown on what we are thinking to do. And he was mostly kind of okay with what we're doing from his point of view. And he gave me some pointers on how things are done in DRA. Like the first thing is because our last time a discussion we were thinking, okay, we're gonna have the CRD, the pod network, right? And then we are going to create a resource claim template out of it. And the question from us was, okay, what sort of stuff do I put here? Do I put the whole network here and then I dereference this? What do we exactly do here, right? So, and he kind of gave me some rundown DRA on how things could be done. So first of all, I understand better the classes, something what's here, device class name. And basically what a device class in the array is a predefinition of any type of your resources. And what's most importantly, the device class name spec is being passed into the status of the resource claim. And I will do a drawing to kind of get the better view of this. So that's one aspect of this. And then the other aspect is of the config here. What to do with this guy. And I think I have an idea about this one as well, where considering DRA is using this raw, I'm not sure how the field is called, raw something type of a field where we can just put any type of field here. So I was thinking, why do we bother with a reference to any object? Let's just use that so that you can put any structure here in the pod network, and basically as is, we would just plug it into this piece. Why we need the two ways? It's and basically I give you a good example. So how would that look like in a real life? Let's say I will want to create a device class of a type VLAN. So basically I want to have a network of a type VLAN, and it implements provides me a VLAN interface and passes that VLAN into the pod through, let's say, Mac VLAN. But my case here is I want to have differentiating pod networks that will be of a VLAN type, but how do I now control which VLAN it is, right? Where do I put the VLAN ID place? And basically that would be the freeform kind of freeform field over here. So what will that mean is that pod network will point to device class VLAN here, and then in the let's say the opaque structure, it will say, oh, this network will be for VLAN 20. What's going to happen then when our controller is going to be doing its stuff, it's going to create a template that is going to point to the device class from the pod network and will put in the exact same values that you put in the pod network over here. So you will have a device class named VLAN plus your additional parameterization, whatever they are. And in our case, VLAN ID. And then what happens when pod references this template, when DRA machinery kind of kicks in, it has to create the resource claim for each of the pod, for each of the resource claim that it references. And what it will do, it will dereference the device class name, grab its parameters stuff, and put it in the status of the claim. And then, of course, put the rest as is as a template, right? What does that give you is in a driver, then you receive the whole data. As a claim, you get the whatever was in the parameters. So you get the VLAN ID. And then in the status, you will have the template. So basically, oh, I am a VLAN type. I need to do VLAN type networking. That way, we achieve the full flexibility. I'm not sure you see it already or not. And yeah, basically the implementers of the drivers get the full benefits of how DRA works, have the means to do stuff. So what do the implementers do? So the implementers provide you two things. When the implementers, I'm calling a provider, right? Let's say Multus, Doug. What I would imagine in the future to Multus properly adapt to this is Multus defines the classes. So basically, what sort of networks I define: VLAN, SRLV, IP VLAN, you name it, right? Whatever you want to support. So you pre-create and predefine when you apply your manifest for Multus, it will create those classes. And inside the class, you define how most of this configuration has to be, however your driver requires it. It's up to you completely. You can copy paste the whole CNI as you had. Sky's the limit. You figure it out, right? And then you have additional control over, okay, if you want to do some more configuration to your class, me as a provider, you can do this structure that will have these fields. So you can plug them into the, let's call it not reference, but opaque, what was it called? The opaque field, right? And basically what's going to happen at the end, the driver for Multus will receive the whole thing. And based on all the inputs, it will just do its bidding, right, for the specific pod. And let me maybe draw a picture to better maybe present. I'm not sure how much, where I lost you or where I hope I didn't, but let me maybe draw a picture because that's going to be a better thing to insert. A drawing. Let me create a new one. You can see, right, me drawing here, folks?
Yep, I see it.
All right.
Yeah.
So what I want to do. So let's start with pod network, right? This guy is going to be a pod network. Okay, we have this, that. And this guy is going to have some, let's say, opaque struct, right? So that's what user defines, right? And that opaque struct is provider specific. So we don't define that in our standard. This is completely provider specific. Same way we were saying, okay, point to a parameters, right? Parameters reference. Why do I'm thinking we don't need to do that. We just can just use the OPEX structure, and then you can do whatever you want in your case, right? I'm not sure whether there is double-edged sword for this, because then you will have some, what about compatibility between two providers, right? I think that's fine in considering like how even DRA is doing it. Each provider will have their own struct on what they expect to have inside the struct, right? Inside this OPEX set. And then there can be additionally some sort of validation from each of the implementers, some controller from their side saying, oh no, this pod network is not valid. You're pointing to my device class, but your structure, your OPEX structure doesn't work, is not up to the standard. And then you can just fail the pod network that it's not ready or some that kind of stuff. So you can have full control of this pod network viability, right? In case someone did some sort of a mistake here. So that's one aspect. So let me copy, let me copy this guy now. So now we have from this, what's going to happen? Oh, the other thing that's we will have is the device class. And it again has a OPEX struct, right? Because it's the same thing. Device class for DRA has the OPEX struct as well. But let's say class OPEX struct, right? So, and this is a provider specific, maybe let me just do here. And this is as well provider specific, like that. So device class on that level is provider specific. You as a provider has to provide me at least one device class that your implementation provisions, right? So there is that guy. Then what our controller does is, let me just maybe copy here. Our controller on each namespace is going to create the resource template, resource claim template, right? So let's go this. And what it's going to hold is the OPEX struct. Let me maybe color code this a bit so that we can better let this be a green. Oh, no, highlight. This, that, and let's make this guy other color. That was red. Let's go this way, right? So this guy. So this will be the red OPEX struct, right? Because we will copy over the whole thing as is. Maybe different color. Which one was this? I think this guy. Yeah. So this will hold the same guy plus. It will hold the device class name, right? Let's say blah. This is a blah one, right? And pod network device references that guy as well. So far, so good. Or are there questions? Ask question if there's something I'm kind of rambling. I hope I don't ramble here. Let's maybe, you know what? Let's remove this transparent. Let's just name this one some way. Yellow, no. Let's do here. Here. I'm trying to color code it so I think we see what's being done, right? So we have the references, right, for that, and then so let me do arrows as well. So this is going to be this and that. So out of the pod network and device class, we create resource claim template, right? And then at the end, what happens is when a pod, let me zoom out a bit. So when a pod next, we have a pod. I need a pod as well and a claim. So if a pod, resource, I think resource claim, or I'm not sure how it's called, resource, let's say this name. And I am going to do here the transparent, the template for pod network. Okay. Right, this will be data plane, this will be data plane, and then resource name, data plane, right? Yeah, let's keep it that. What's going to happen is there will be a controller that is going to, based on those information, right? Because that's going to be this guy. So this will create a template, a resource claim that will hold the op extract, and then status will hold this guy. And this is what your driver receives, right? Because this is what, then let's call it, let's maybe do this. And this again is driver specific, is provider specific, and it receives all this, right? And basically that's where the buck stops, in my opinion, from this point of view. Let maybe put an arrow here as well, because this is where it ends, right? Questions? Everyone's silent. I'm not sure. Is this too complex or not? I hope not. What do you think?
I'm just absorbing. I don't necessarily see anything that is well, I guess here's the thing. So yes, there is some complexity here. However, I sort of feel like it's necessary in order to make this something that's intuitive for users to interact with, right? Because what users should be interacting with, from what I'm getting, is the pod network and potentially the device class, right? And then behind that, it's like our implementations would be wrangling the other resources to make that.
Yeah.
The
So
one thing
I color code it. The user creates only blue, right? The user is going to create only blue in this case.
Okay.
The red ones is what the provider provides, right? This is
Okay.
this is your network attachment definition. So think of it as, what classes do I support? Let's say Mac VLAN, whatever, right? So right now, Doug, in network attachment definition, you have to know what sort of parameters a Mac VLAN CNI accepts, or SRV
Totally.
accepts, because there is some differentiators, right? There are some, mostly they are maybe simple, but some of them, like Mac VLAN needs a parent, parent interface, right? Or something like that, or master interface, I think it's called. So
Yes.
those are things that then be plugged into device class, right? Maybe, or might not. And then depending on how you want to define it, because what you can do, you can as well add a ability to override things, right? You specify something in your class, but the plane, but the pod network in here, this OPEX structure can override the whole thing. It will use the type. You probably cannot change the type, but you can change the parameters, like for example the master, right? No, this network is going to use other master, and then basically when you get the resource claims in your driver, you will see, then you can basically prioritize, right? Oh, the red one has this field already, I will use that one, I will prioritize that first over the class one, right? So it's basically, what I'm saying here is the full flexibility of how this is going to be implemented is on the implementation provider side. We are not stifling anyone in this, because you provide the device class and you define the OPEX structure, right? and it has to be up to whatever your driver requires, right? And it can be anything. The next good thing about this whole thing is the scheduler. We don't care in terms of this does not stifles you on that part as well. Keep in mind the resource slices, right? I think there is a, let me just call this out. There is something called resource slice, right? So resource slice holds the data on which node. But I make it style. This guy holds the data for the scheduler to know, okay, where this resource, this data plane resource is, right, where it's available. This is provided again by red. As I said here, it's all provided by the red. And whether it's a virtual device, whether it's all the additional blows and whistles that DRA is building for the resources, it doesn't matter. It boils down always to the resource slice, and the rest is abstracted. So we don't, the additional features that they built, it's okay, it's features that you can enhance your driver with. It's not something that multi-networking as an API gets involved in, right? Because keep in mind, we are reusing here DRA in full. You're responsible for the three pieces below, and basically whatever DRA provides you in terms of resource slices, you go ahead and use them, right? The virtual devices, the partitioning of the device, there is that aspect as well. This is all things still boils down to resource slice and how then you present them in the cluster for your resource. So basically that piece is completely opaque to and abstracted from the multi-networking. Yeah.
But I think one comment from my side on this one, like coming from SRV area, or like now starting to think maybe on other ones. So today, for example, on Multus, when you're using, for example, Mac VLAN or IP VLAN or things like that, there is no way to like put a node selector or allocation. So in this case, let's say our DRA driver will say on this node I can create from a master interface ETH 0, 1, and 2, and another one will say 6 and 7, ETH 6 and 7. So there is no way on the API for pod network, so I did not find that where we can put the cell expression that will go to the resource claim template to select
that be
device.
So that should be then either defined in a struct or not. No, I think struct doesn't. This OPEX struct won't hold it. It's just parameters.
Yeah, exactly.
Selection,
I think
selection
we need
isn't there.
one.
I see what you're saying. Can we then create? Should we then create a device class that will point the specific interface? Sebastian, I see what you're saying. I know there is a much more. I'm aware of the cell selectors, but do we need that here? Can you just create one per each of the interfaces? I know it's cumbersome.
Yeah, I don't know if like that's a good idea, because if I have 3 nodes and they have like different interface name, and that can happen. I have different cards or things like that. Right. So I will expect like to put the pod network, and it will allocate to one of the 3 nodes. I don't care which of them, as long as they are on ETH red, for example.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I currently find that we are missing. And another one, but I think this one, I need to try and take this one directly more to DRA, is the resource, the resource, I will say selection or allocation. I will just give you an example on my.
But maybe before we go there, when I think about this, how this is done today with device plugin, that is covered by that.
So yes, but in that case you will need like a device plugin, and you put the resource that you want that device, and you can have multiple nodes saying I expose the same device, like in the SROV, and then you you have like the two parts. In this case, the DRA driver, so the DRA driver will expose the name saying I have a network red or something like that on these nodes, all good. But there is no way from pod network CR to copy to the resource claim template. Like in the resource claim template is like the same way as you put on the resource in the pod saying I want network red. That's what we are missing here.
Just echoing in chat that what I said in chat, but Sebastian, this is a really good call out. That kind of stuff is really challenging right now, and if we can have a path forward for something like that, that's something that I would say is categorically better than net attached F, right?
So keep in mind that this is where the resource slice comes in, right? That replaces your whole labeling need. I think what's missing from what Sebastian's calling out, he would want to have much more refined way on to say, okay, this node uses ETH1, the other node is using ETH10, and then is that true, Sebastian? Is that what am I?
Yeah, and they're logically same pod network called
right, and logically, won't that be handled again and hidden behind resource slice?
Yeah, it will. You can say that the resource slice will report the same. It can report like one of the parameters, for example, on this one saying this is the network red, and
So,
then I need a way to copy that to the resource claim cell selector.
Why do you need the cell selector? Because this is what I'm confused on. Once your driver has the knowledge on, or somewhere in the device class, what if you were say to, okay, let me have, you know what, use PCI device X or whatever you have in device, whatever that filter and selecting you have today in SROV operator or device plugin even for SROV. Where you either select by PCI device or by vendor and model. Let's say vendor and model, right? So let's say your device class has this here. It will specify a vendor and a model in the OPEC structure, right? And now your driver sees that OPEC thing, and okay, I find all the vendors and models. Internally, I know which one is what. I enumerate them accordingly. I don't care whether they are ETH0 or ETH10 or whatever ENSX. What I care about is I'm going to report you that this vendor and model is on my node, and I have 5 of them. Or then even further, you can use the partitions model, even which I heard is very useful for SRV as well. Where okay, I have this PF physical function. And then it can do as well n number of VFs, right? So there is that, and this is what you report as the owner of the driver and as well not only of the driver of the, I'm not sure, the mechanism that kind of enumerates and creates the resource slice. You report that, and then you internally know whether it's a ANS. So I'm not sure what the cell. I understand the cell is useful in a case where okay, I have 1,000 GPUs across the board, and I'm going to report them as one. They will have various different characteristics. And in this case, I want to, okay, grab one that has, I don't know, some specific parameter. Won't that be the case for cell? And here, is it really necessary? So what I described before on how would you use it with the vendor and model, won't that work?
So I try to think, because let's say vendor and model is, let's say it's like the easy one. If I'm looking on what most of my like users for the survey operator is doing, so you create a pool of VF. So you have, let's say, 5 VF or something like that. And then we are like exposing them as a resource. And when we create the network attachment definition, we put that resource name. So that resource name is the part that I'm searching where it's going to go on the pod network.
Right, and that resource claim search is defined by the SRV network object, right? Because this is where you defined
You put on the SRV network you put like the resource name, and then we copy it into the network attachment definition annotation.
Right, but with the resource name you define filters, and those are the filters here. So SRV, let me save this, and let me maybe find what I mean.
Okay.
GitHub SRV operator. Where is this guy? Let's look at that guy. Share this tab, right? So if you think about this, you have the network. No, that does not. Let's see to the, where is a node state? No, node policy. This is what I'm referring to, right? Node policy holds the name. This is Intel NICs, but then holds the NIC selector.
Right, and that's how we select devices. And this part,
exactly. So you put this part in the class, right? Because this is like network policy is the class, right? In this case as well. So you put this part in the class. So this enumerates where the stuff is. Your driver sees, okay, I am to enumerate for my data plane from my previous example. I am to enumerate these filters as a data plane resource. And then I will discover, I don't need node selector, right? Because then it's, or you can put even the whole thing into the class, right? And then what it does, it will enumerate this stuff. Keep in mind now, I am suggesting that I am moving away from this operator, right? And because I'm plugging into DRA, right? So now
and that's something that I'm like working on, to have like a POC for the SRV operator using DRA.
Right. So basically what happens, you pull this whole thing into the class. So that gives you all the data that you need for your enumeration. And let's say even a number of VFs, you don't care at that point, because this is n. This could be, then we can be less, because this is like, okay, I want to have 4. I know you can divide them in some ways. You do this for division, because you can then load various drivers for each. Then maybe we can be more dynamic, and I can dynamically pick up to some resources, and I can be DPDK or a net device. So there is that aspect. So that's up to your implementation, of course, though. But basically, you could pull the whole thing into the class, define basically your resources as such, and then your network points to this guy, and that's it. And then even further, because like here you don't have VLAN, and then my pod network can even define VLAN on top of that, right? So let's say I will have an
exactly.
So then going back to my example, share this tab, right? So if I go to my example here, so now I put VLAN for the SROV here in the pod network, then I know it's an SROV for Intel, let's say. I will name the network Intel, because I'm going to point to the device class Intel. So SROV Intel and on VLAN X, right? That's my pod network, right? And it points to a device class that has the Intel listed here as from the previous example. And your driver understands that, and based on that information, it publishes the resource slices for each of the nodes accordingly, right? I think then you don't need the cell, because the cell is needed when I want to enumerate the whole thing, and then I want to further filter out from the top level. I know that's useful, but I think then I don't want to, because then let's get rid of the pod network, and let's just go and with the resource claim template, right? And we know there are limitations for that, right?
I agree with you.
I think there will be some. We won't probably be able to leverage all the capabilities like the cell that you called out from here, but keep in mind that this is for networking. This is not for like for mix and matching multiple. You always have one. The resource claim is always be over number one. It's not so that's one important fact, right? We should not be able to combine here multiple devices here that, or maybe you can, depending on how you define, right? Because this will no, step back, because resource claim will be controlled by the controller that creates the template, right? And the template will always request a one resource only for that network, right?
Yeah, and then we'll attach a couple of them. I have to say, like, from what I'm like playing, at least with my POC, the thing is if you check the SRV operator that we spoke about, so I'm leaving the operator part of creating the resource because it's so you need a way, you will need at least a way at the end to select if you have a bunch of nodes and they have like different PCI address, for example, or you don't want to select all the Intel vendors, you want only a specific NIC. So my DRA is like publishing the resource name that it's like exists in the SRV operator. And my DRA driver is, let's say, switch, like replacing the SRV CNI and the SRV device plugin. That's the two things
Right.
that it's combining together.
That's right.
more or less.
But basically something has to advertise the resource slice.
Exactly. That's the config daemon
Oh,
from
okay.
the SRV
All right.
operator. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's more or less like my POC. And one thing that I find out, and I think it's more like DRA related, and that problem is a bandwidth. So that one is
Oh, okay.
really
No, and that's
pain.
yeah, keep on going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was saying, let's say we have a request from a couple of customers saying, I want to do like scheduling for bandwidth. It's not like
Right.
enforcing the bandwidth, it's just doing, I want a NIC with 5 gig of
Yeah.
bandwidth.
And this is where the resource slice can give you that, right? And this is all on your side of implementation, because resource slides you can divide the resource the any of the resources by VF, but as well on the bandwidth. You could do that, right? Let's say I have 200 gig PF. Okay, then let's be, and let's not over provision, right? Let's be very diligent, and then maybe a VF can have as well. I'm not sure whether it can do bandwidth and QoS over there. I'm not sure how that is. There a possibility to do that? But still, then at least you logically cannot create more VFs than what is guaranteed by the 200 gig or something, right? But this boils down to your resource claim. This is resource slice, right? That's what I'm getting at. I'm trying to get to the point that it's all in your implementation, and that's abstracted from us here.
Yeah, from here, yes, that's why I need to like take this one to DRA itself, because if you think about the resource slice, it's like you can have 10 virtual functions, and then one of them can now allocate, I don't know, 100 gig, and then the other ones use like 1 gig, and there is no way today on the so on the resource slice,
I think this is where the partitioned, there's a new
you
cap.
you can do the shareable one. I was looking into that, but that's completely crazy. If you have a 400 gig NIC, you will need to create like 1 gigs devices and then start meshing all of them, and it's like.
What about the partitionable cap that's coming in? Have you seen that?
No, is it open already?
Yeah, there is a cap. I think Lionel was calling this out last week. Let me see.
Interesting.
Yeah, there is something like partition cap. I just had it opened, but I closed it. Let me try to find that. Which supposed to
I will
try to search for
it. Don't worry.
DRA partition, something partition resources, and basically that's where you can partition your as you want, and yeah, that gives you more ways, and I think kind of handles what you're saying. Look into that, but still keep in mind what we are discussing is completely out of scope for this.
Yeah, it's out of the scope of the red one. Yeah, we're only on the
we are we are looking only on the in our here discussion. We want to define that that you have to create this. The red pieces are on driver provider, right? The red pieces are on driver, and then user creates blue. User could create class as well if he knows what he's doing, right? Maybe I wonder whether here, because this is something that's tricky. If what I said in terms of the SRV operator, the policies, right? Usually user creates the policies, or maybe the platform owner.
It's the network, network admin.
Maybe the platform owner or network admin would create the platform owner or network admin will create the device classes for you, right? Based on this, because it's more specialized knowledge about what devices you have, what's not. It's like for the network SRV policies, right, themselves. So you would pre-create those, and then users just create a pod networks, right? With a specified, even that pod network should be probably created by the network admin, because okay, I will divide the world for you in this cluster in such a way, right? Not the other, right? Because IPAM has a meaning here, then what sort of ranges you can use, what's not. So maybe pod network as well should be created by someone, right? So this is where the blue one is created as well, and then we create the template, and that's how the whole linking is. The other aspect of this is I ask as well, John, about RBAC permissions and what's not. And that aspect is as well fully just namespacing. There is no currently restriction of, oh, I can attach to this guy or not. So we are just gonna wait and see what RBAC DRA is gonna come up with, and then we're just gonna introduce the same thing. For now, I'm thinking Pod Network will introduce a maybe something like namespaced field in the future. Maybe for now, let's not, or maybe we maybe can do it in the get-go to limit which namespaces I can create the template, right? Some sort of label selector or something to say, okay, you can create then the claim on the template only in specific namespaces. And basically then only those pods can reference it, because keep in mind, pod network, we are planning to be cluster scoped, and the resource claim is namespace scoped.
Yeah.
So this is where our controller will handle this and create those guys. Yeah, I think that's what I had in mind. With that, folks, I'm not sure how you feel about, is that something that the flexibility that this will give, will that be sufficient, Sebastian, even from your SROV? I see the cell. I gave you some ideas how you could avoid the cell usage, but will that still be something that would be useful if it even without the cell, the way I suggested?
Yeah, I think it does. I think I saw all the pieces here together. I want to like continue to see that my POC is like working, and then like connecting the pod network part to it will be the easy part, let's say, after I have all the red boxes.
Yeah, if you have the DRA the way I described it, and you can define them as the way you want, right? The one thing I would keep in mind, the template is something that we want to auto-generate, right? So if you're gonna use some of the pieces where we cannot, this is where maybe you would have to adjust, right?
No, exactly. That's the same. I want to create like the resource claim template by the way that you are creating the pod network.
Okay.
So just for my POC to see that all the pieces are working together.
Okay, that would be great. I would appreciate it. Yeah. Keep us posted on your progress, because that will be a kind of validation of what we are thinking here.
Yeah, and I'm more or less trying to commit myself by proposing to KubeCon Europe. So I will need to make this one work by the 1st of April. So that's the only way I get stuff done, when it's POCs and not real work.
All right, sounds great. Let's call it for today. And yeah, I think the next step, we need to talk about the NRI's path on is there anything we need to look at that areas, or ask the SIG networking to kind of change? Let's see where that can come. We have a next week session. It's right before for Thanksgiving, so I definitely gonna be here. I'm not sure whether the rest of the folks are available, but yeah, let's see. And yeah, see you folks next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.